All right, let's get this show on the road, as they say. Was that very Canadian of me? I don't know. I'm from Ottawa, so we have a little bit of the Ottawa Valley thing going on here. I'd like to introduce Rob McClellan. Rob McClellan has over 22 years of experience leading business development for technology companies, driving growth in North America. Rob currently serves as a regional sales manager for SentinelOne in Canada. Prior to SentinelOne, Rob has helped several organizations expand into Canada, driving new logos and brand awareness, including taking part in 2 successful IPOs. Rob, welcome to the stage. If you're back there, hopefully.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, there he is.
Might have to talk louder. Oh, there we go.
Goodness.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm here from SentinelOne. We are leading the XDR revolution here in Canada and the rest of the world. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Wendel Clark to the room today. What can I say about a man I've met less than an hour ago? Probably a lot, because he's been on TV most of my life and watched him through most of the 80s and 90s. In what they can do on the ice with the Toronto Maple Leafs. One thing that really stands out for me, and sort of looking at Wendell in his career, this is a man that was drafted first overall in 1985 and had the distinct honor and privilege of not only leading the Leafs in points that year, but also in penalty minutes. Number 17 is Wendell's number, and if I think back to a memory that stands out, for those of you in the crowd that might be old enough, May 17th, ironically enough, 1993, was game 1, I believe, of the conference final. And Wendell was on the ice around the same time that a young Doug Gilmour got clipped in the head by Marty McSorley and got thrown to the ice. Those of you who don't know Wendell's playing style from back in the day, there was maybe a brief second before the gloves were down and he and Marty were going at it. What that means to us in this room is, as a good cybersecurity platform would do, Wendell was protecting his critical assets. And I look at that and think, well, that's really cool. He also went on to score a hat trick in Game 6 of that series, which they ultimately lost when Wayne Gretzky scored underneath the net. But we won't talk about that. It is with great pleasure that I have the honor of introducing Wendel Clark. Ladies and gentlemen, Wendel Clark.
Born in Kelvington, Saskatchewan, the Maple Leafs made defenseman Wendel Clark the first overall pick in the 1985 NHL entry draft. That season, Wendel set a Leafs record for goals by a rookie with 34, and was runner-up for the Calder Trophy, all while serving 227 minutes in the box. As a gift from Leafs management, each player was given a trip for 2 to go anywhere in the world they wanted to fly. Most players chose exotic locations. Wendell flew home to Saskatchewan. When asked why, Wendell simply explained that it was planting season on his parents' farm and that he needed to lend a hand. Combined with his on-ice ferociousness, it was that kind of down-to-earth nature off the ice that made Leaf fans fall in love with the kid from Kelvington. In his 7th season, Clark was named captain, and the following year he would lead the Leafs on a memorable playoff run. Wendell averaged nearly a point a game in the spring of 1993, but might be best remembered for teaching Marty McSorley a valuable lesson in Game 1 of the conference final.
And this is going to draw Clark and McSorley into a rocket. Oh, Clark is nailing McSorley. Nails him with another uppercut.
The following season, the Clark-led Leafs would reach the conference final again, courtesy of Wendell's 2-goal night in Game 7 against the Sharks. He still holds the record for the most multiple goal Game 7s in NHL history. Leafs president Ken Dryden described Wendell upon his retirement. Game in, game out, year in, year out, just a kid cruising the ice looking to cause trouble. A wicked wrist shot for a goal, a crushing body check, a fight, opponents' bodies littered on the ice, fans out of their seats and the place in an uproar. In sports, it's said that the fans are with you, win or tie. Leaf fans have been with Wendell, win or tie or loss, because he has been with them, win or tie or loss.
Cause it's all that I can take anymore. Is this love that I'm feeling? Is this the love that I'm searching for?
Thank you. I'm gonna have to watch it. It's downhill now after that, guys. I don't have to speak. No, I'm here going to do a little chit chat. Then I'm going to open it up for you guys to have any questions. You want to talk hockey before the rest of the day, you can't ask questions. Just sit there and listen. Where you can do a little bit of chit chatting up here, talk about our Leafs or whatever you want to talk about. But I'm here a little bit of security. I did 10 years of security with the Leafs. Back then, it wasn't technology ranked. I came out without even my gloves on. So that's how I was ready for security right now. But with that, in the life that we have, everything changes. Whether you're what you guys are doing, what I did. There's 5 changes that I had when I played. So I played junior hockey, and I got drafted to the Leafs in the first round. And that first day of training camp, I had to make a change. I played defense my whole life. First day of training camp, they said you're a forward. So at 18, they said, you're playing forward the rest of your career. Imagine doing that to Austin Matthews, tell me he's a defenseman. So that was my first change or hurdle or just getting to the level I wanted to be at. So I obviously was going to say yes. The paycheck in the NHL was better than the one I was making in junior in Saskatoon, which was $48 every 2 weeks. So getting a chance to stay, I'll play forward. And then I play a few years. You get to play with the greatest player probably I got to play with in time, and he was already 35, was Borje Salming. We lost Borje Salming this year, but probably the most talented player I played with, and he was 35. At practice, it was his puck. All us young guys would try to take it, so I can only imagine how good a guy Borje was when he was playing with Darryl in the 70s, because in the 80s, he was still our best player. And so that get a chance to play with Borje in my first few years. And then I came across my second of 5 things. I ended up getting injured. Never really was injured my whole life. And then I go down with a back injury, missed 100 games, and then injured both knees one after the other. So another 40 games each season. So in a 4-year window there, I missed 180 games of missed at the age of 20. So that was another hurdle I had to go through. You do everything on your own. So you grow up everything team, and then all of a sudden you're injured and you do everything by yourself. And that's one of the big hurdles for a young guy. And we didn't have this technology where we could be sitting on the phone and doing things we wanted to do. You're basically your mind's wondering if you're going to play, how well you can play when you get through it all, and if you'll get through it all. So that was one of the big changes for me, and learning to be patient and move on. And the third thing, which actually turned out to be a great one, was 91, 92. Harold passed away, which was a tough one. But then they changed the management. Cliff Fletcher came in and built our team. That was the 92 to 93. And Cliff was the guy that put that team together, making that trade for Dougie Gilmour. It was 5 for 5. We were on a bus going to Minnesota to catch a plane, and they are announcing the trade, so they didn't tell any of us what was going on. They just kind of started pulling guys off the bus. So about the third guy off the bus, we started hiding because we didn't know where you're going, what's going on. But it ended up being a 5 for 5 deal, and that's kind of how we found out, and we didn't know who we were even getting back. So the Cliff made the Dougie trade. Then in the summer, Pat Burns was hired. And that was the biggest change for me, because Pat Burns was a tough cop that came in, and he was changing the culture. So I was really the only guy left, Todd Gill and myself, from the original 80s team. So he took it out on us to prove a point. Not in a bad way. In his own way as coaching, he was trying to show them, and then us being leaders from here, and I had the C on the jersey. If I kept taking it, so that whole start of that 92-93 year, and the team would just rally. We had a good group of guys, and he knew the more he picked on me, the more the team, it's just not his fault, it's a team game. And that was how he kind of put our team together. He wasn't going to tell us that. In today's world, you have to tell everybody if you're being mean to somebody. But back then, Pat Burns really didn't tell anybody he was being mean. That was just his way of, how do I get this team? Because he didn't care if the team liked him. He wanted us all to be together as the 20 guys that are playing. So he had a game plan. And then come playoff time, everything worked out. We upset Detroit, and then we had a good little run. So that was another real growing period for me, because that was the first time you get drafted, you're first overall, and all of a sudden, year 5, 6, you have a coach that's picking on you. So another learning part of as you grow up and get older. And then my fourth one is getting traded. You don't expect to get traded. At the end of 94, I probably had the best season I'd had stats-wise. We went to the semifinals again, and I was shooting a Cheerios commercial the day of the draft. No cell phones unless you were that rich guy in town that, remember, had the bat phone in the console of his car. That was the only phone, so they couldn't get a hold of me when I got traded. So I was filling up with gas at the Esso station at Front and Bathurst, looking at the Molson Brewery there that was there then, and turned the radio on as I was filling up to see who we drafted. And that's when I heard I got traded to the Quebec Nordiques for Matt Sundin. And so it was the radio that told me. Cliff couldn't tell me. Nobody could tell me because there was no cell phones. They didn't know I was out and around. So that was how I found out I was traded, was at a gas station. I immediately went across to the Molson Brewery. And so that's the first time as a hockey player. Remember, you play hockey. I leave in Kelvington, Saskatchewan, playing junior in Saskatoon, then getting drafted to Toronto Maple Leafs, all at the age of 18. At the end of my first year, I go home to my high school graduation. I went to the graduation. I didn't say I graduated. But everything is just fun. Like you're like even today's game, the guys leaving in the NHL, we expect them to know all this world politics stuff and everything that goes on. And these are 18-year-olds coming to the NHL. And they can just play hockey. And then all of a sudden you get traded. It's the first, okay, this is a business. It's not just playing for your Kelvington Wheat Kings or Saskatoon Blades or Toronto Maple Leafs, which you hold dear, but then you realize it's a job and everybody can get traded. I guess I should have woke up and smelt the coffee when Wayne Gretzky got traded. Anybody could be traded. But that's the one thing you're tied to. So that's a hurdle where you pick up and leave. So when you get traded, I was in the summer, so I was very fortunate that you had a month to get together and get to Quebec, and I figured out I knew I wasn't a Toronto Maple Leaf anymore, because I was driving to training camp in Quebec. I got to the other side of Kingston, entering the Quebec border almost. I got pulled over for speeding, and I got my first ticket. When you're a Leaf, you don't get tickets. I got my first ticket. I'm now at Quebec Nordique. And so that change I got to do, where if you get traded mid-season, which in my very first game, my centerman was Billy DeLego. I played one game in my first game forward in Boston, and my centerman, I got him traded. He got traded at the end of the game for Tom Fergus. Tom Fergus came to Toronto. At the end of the game, Billy DeLego stayed in Boston. His wife took his clothes to Buffalo in his next game. He didn't get to come home on the plane and get packed up and leave. He stayed with his toothbrush and extra t-shirt that you took for the road trip. That's what and Tom Fergus came back with us. And so that's kind of how trades happen in that world. You stay, and now you're part of that team, and we'll figure out how we get your stuff to you. You just up and move. We had to actually, even in that era, you don't have the phone or technologies. Alan Bester was playing net. His wife had his first baby. He was playing net that night in Los Angeles. He didn't get to come home for that. It was just that, but you don't know that. There's no technology to get a hold of anybody. It was just something that all of a sudden happened, and he's in net. Where today, I think they get about a week off or something, don't they, when they have a baby or something like that on the team? And so all that has changed. And with the security, and then the last thing for myself is retiring. So I retired at 32 after 15 years in the league, 32, 33. And that's one of the biggest changes. You go from a professional athlete being 30-some years old, and you go right back into the real world. And really, you left high school. And so you're going back to the real world. Now you maybe have life skills because you're 30, but you're starting. So a lot of professional athletes, their toughest change is going from athlete to back to the real world, because you've never gone through university, working your way up in your job. You went to NHL star, to management, now bang, you have to start. And a lot of players, and it doesn't matter the sport, that's the biggest transition. You're starting now at the bottom to work your way up again. And a lot of players don't understand that. And today it's a little easier. They've got a little salary to go back on. We didn't quite have the salary that they have today. But even in today's game, our big 5 players on the Leafs make a lot of money. Everybody else that's playing on the Leafs will be working when they're done. That's just the cost of living and what they do. It's not always, they're not all under the same boat that Austin and Willie and the guys are. So they'll be doing the same things that I went through. So even in all pro sports are the same way. Everybody always pictures it as the best player. This is what they all must get. Where realistically, the average player in the NHL plays 4 years. And that's top to bottom. That's the average length of a career in the NHL, because there's a lot of guys that get a cup of coffee and that's it. Play 10 games, that's all they ever play. And then you get the guys that play 15, 16 years. So the average is about that 4-year window. And with that, I'm going to open it up with you guys. I want to chit-chat about, take me wherever you want, because later on you can't do this. You're probably just listening maybe. So talk a little hockey. I can answer your questions and then see where you want to go. I know it's easier at night because you've had a few beers. This is strictly on coffee. You have to have confidence to ask a question. So has anybody got any questions out there that want to know some answer to?
Can Boston keep up their pace, and do we make it out of round 1?
Why do we start with that question? I work for the team. I have to walk the fence on my answer. It's unbelievable, Boston. They fell into the goalie. That all of a sudden he's unbelievable, that nobody knew. I don't even think they knew. And their old guys keep trucking. Like they've done well, but they all play that one system that's never changed. So they interchange their parts and they play a real playoff bound type system. It can win in any era. The thing about meeting Boston, I'd like to meet them in the second and third round, not the first round. Because of their age, they're going to give you 7 games. I don't know if they can give you 21 games. And so hopefully if you're meeting, but we are due. Like it's been 6, 7 years. We are due. Our team is at the right age now where our best players aren't kids and yet they're not old. You know, they've played 4, 5, 6 years, so it's their time to grab it. It's up to them to grab this and take their system and have fun with it, because we're all wanting to watch some hockey in April, May, and June. That's been the goal. I've been golfing way too much. I got way too many golf rounds in. I don't have to go to a Leaf game in April, May, and June.
So with thinking about the future then, Wall as the next generation of goalie, he's been on an incredible run with Marley. What do you see there?
It's like he just keeps moving his way up, but and you don't know till you get to the highest level. The young guy that we have right now, Samsonov, he was a first rounder with Washington 5 years ago. My son was drafted in the same year after Samsonov was our goalie, and it's his time to grab it because he was back up in Washington. He got to come here on a cheaper contract, so it's his time. Actually, right now with the injury going with Matt, it's his time to grab it. If he grabs it, he's in the right situation. I think he's a pretty good goalie. I think our goaltending is better this year than it was last year. And that makes our defense look better. We're winning more one-goal games, where before we had to win 5-4, where now we're winning 5-1, 5-2. So that is looking good for the playoffs.
What message do you give to parents these days in all sports?
Make sure they're having fun. At the end of the day, you make sure the kids are having fun playing the sports. It's more today than ever. We grew up playing lots of sports because of how it was. Today, it's more individual, whether it be hockey only as they get older, soccer only, football only. Hockey gets blamed for being hockey only, but really all the sports are the same. The coaches are saying that making it demanding. But that if you're going to be really good at any sport, I go back to the Olympics. Anybody that plays in the Olympics, if you're a swimmer or a gymnast or something, you're doing it 24/7. You have to do it a lot if you want to be the best. It doesn't matter what sport you're in. That's just the way of life. We did the wake-up call in 1972 when we met the Russians, when that's what they did. They played hockey year-round, and our NHL guys, they played hockey in the winter, they had some fun, they got in shape in training camp. And those first few games in Canada, they were still drinking, getting in shape when they met the Russians, and they had this is a new way of thinking. Morning skates were invented in 72. Because the Russians had nothing to do when they came over here, so they skated in the morning to keep them active. So then that got applied, and now the NHL has morning skates. And so that's kind of where sports is at, but you got to make sure your son or daughter's having fun. That's the bottom line, because you can be wanting to play all the time, but if you're the worst player on the best team, you might not be playing as much, so now it's mentally not as fun. So the kid's not having fun, the parents aren't having fun, and everybody's blaming the coach. Where if you moved your son or daughter down to the AA level, now they're the best player, so they get all the ice time. You're happy with the coach, you're happy with the system. When they're carrying their hockey bag out of the hallway, they're happy. Parents are happy. It's not about the levels. I can name lots of players that didn't play AAA level hockey until midget or till junior. Dave Reed, Frost, who plays in Philadelphia right now, my son's age, 23 years old. He played AA till 15, didn't play AAA. Then at 15, played AAA. The biggest thing with kids is don't kill their confidence. That's because you can't teach confidence. You can teach skating, you can teach stick handling, you can teach a lot of things, but you can't teach confidence. So that's make sure they're fun and confident while they're playing. Toughest opponent when it came to my wife right now, if I'm not home. But, there's no one toughest, because every team in our era in the 80s, we played in Toronto Maple Leafs, Minnesota, St. Louis, Detroit, Chicago. We are known as the Chuck Norris division. It was like there was this division that the Smythe, that the Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver was a skating, fast, puck moving. And then the East, with Montreal and Washington and Philly, they a little bit of both, where our Midwest teams were all the Chuck Norris division. So if the game got ugly, everybody was going to start fighting to see if that was the way to win. And so I wasn't very bright because I liked to do it. Remember, all us guys, we think fighting's fun until you're about 25, and then we figure out that it hurts. So we're not very smart. And so when I started, and I played a physical brand because I liked playing that way all the way up, I never had a fight until junior. So not until I was 18 did I have my first fight. It's not that you played that way growing up. And so my first two fights in the NHL were actually Marty McSorley in exhibition season. So he was my wake-up call as a forward. You get in more fights when you're a forward because if you're a physical player, you're initiating something all the time. So you're always chasing something down, finishing your hits. So I end up getting in more fights almost because you're initiating because of the style I played. And then you had that and Bob Probert and Ben Wilson. I put Bob Probert down as the toughest guy mentally because at 35, he was still doing it. So every new young guy come in the league, he looked like the prototypical tough guy in the NHL. About 6'4", half his teeth were gone. Sweaters only came down to his elbow because he was too big. And so he looked like, so every new young guy wanted him because he was the guy they watched growing up. So I give him full credit that he kept answering the bell to another 20-year-old because that's the hardest thing to do when you're 30 because you realize you're just there to hang on as long as you can. And these new young guys were doing what he did.
As one of the most important characteristics of a leader?
Well, I think as a player, speaking from the player's point of leadership, is you're going to follow the guy. Like the players I played with, I came back, Dougie Gilmour was captain when I got traded back, but then when I went to Quebec, Joe Sakic was the captain. When I played in Detroit, Eisman was the captain. Those guys all led by example. They talked the least in the dressing room, but they did everything Right. So they were everybody's best friend. Whether right from when they walked in the door of the building that let them in, to the training staff, to up and down the lineup, they were a great person. And then they were the hardest working guy in practice. Not only were they the best player, but they were the hardest working guy. So they didn't take the night off. So us guys that weren't as good, well, if the best player's not taking the day off, we can't. So everything was lead by example. And then pulling everybody together. That's in the team. And it's more that way now than when we played, because everybody was either from the States, Canada, and a sprinkling from Europe. Well, now I think we got 7 different countries in our dressing room. So you got 7 different languages. So as a leader, you got to make sure everybody's on the page, pulling and doing their job. And it's not the old school where people think that somebody grabbed you and put you in the corner and told you what to do. Because especially in today's world, somebody's just going to look you off and say, well, it's no fun playing here, I quit. And they're still playing, but they've mentally turned off. So now they're not as good. So once one of your pieces out of 20 players isn't as good, you're not good enough to win. Because you need all the pieces. Whether you're the 4th line guy, you have to do your job. And that's the big thing, is mainly leading by example. And I think as you go up, the coach is leading by example. He's setting the game plan that everybody has to buy into. Because it doesn't matter what system you play, because the system's just very little. The rink's never changed, the game's the same. But you have to have everybody on the same page. If you're not on the same page, it doesn't matter how good you are, you won't win. And that's the biggest problem that a general manager has at the next level when trade deadline's coming up right now, and they want, okay, we get this guy, we're a better team on paper. But we might trade one of the guys that we don't know is actually the glue in the dressing room that keeps everybody together. So you get better on paper, but you're not as good a team after the trade. So that's very touchy with the general manager who's trying to move the pieces, and he's not in the room. He's listening to people, but he's not in the room. And then your president's putting the whole organization together, making sure everybody is, and the outside staying positive. Everybody has their different roles, but I don't think it really matters other than you're leading by example and representation of yourself, not demanding it. You're leading by example. I think more today than ever is you're leading by example. Yes?
Did Leaf Station get cheated out of Stanley Cup in 1993?
Well, I did. I don't know if they did. But, I don't think if we were good enough to win, we'd have won Game 7. That was the first Game 7 we lost that year. It was against Los Angeles. We kind of, actually, Dougie said he watched in COVID for the first time, watched Game 7. And he couldn't believe all the penalties that weren't called as it was, let alone that one, or Game 6. And the big thing is Wayne Gretzky was a pretty good player. And there's no way they were going to call a penalty on Wayne Gretzky for high sticking. Because remember the rules today, if he high stick, draws blood, it's a 4-minute penalty, goes to the penalty box. Rules in 1993, Wayne Gretzky gets kicked out of the game for an accidental 4-minute high stick. So that ref's going, there's no way I'm throwing Wayne Gretzky out of the game. So then he went to the linesman. Did you see that? So then he could blame the linesman if they told him he did. And the linesmen are going, I'm not sticking my neck out. I didn't see nothing. And I think, and they all know, because it happened right at the face-off, right there. But we still won Game 7. But after Game 5 and 6, we had some of the Toronto Maple Leafs media who are supposed to be on our team, because they're Toronto Maple Leafs on sticking up for our town. They'd called out Wayne Gretzky and Luc Robitaille saying they haven't showed up and are they washed up. So our media in Game 5 and 6, so the press notes, Wayne Gretzky's reading in the dressing room, oh, I'm washed up, am I? So Game 6, he gets like 4 points, and Game 7, he gets like 5 points, 3 goals, 2 assists, I think. So Wayne wasn't washed up. But that was more the factor of getting Wayne and those guys is because of the hype in Toronto. Everybody loves to play in Toronto. The toughest home building to play in out of any rink in the NHL is our rink in Toronto. Half the team, 8 players to 10 players in every team are from Ontario. So this is another home game. They love playing here. Families here, all they did was watch Leafs on TV growing up. This is a fun building for them. We don't get up to play a game in New Jersey, Carolina. Like there's no extra oomph there because we're not from there. Nobody's from there. that's playing. So there's no extra, but you come to Toronto, people on the visiting team love to play here. So it's a tough city to be a home team in. You got to be ready because everybody's coming every night for their best game. Hence why Pat Burns came in, and his motto was either if they're going to win, they will limp out of the rink. He wanted us, okay, if they're beating us, they're getting beat up on the way out. But he wanted that so that when they come in here, they knew it wasn't going to be an easy game because he knew how much people love. Because there's a lot of kids from Ontario. Every big player that comes in, Stamkos comes in. He's got 50 people here, and he scores a hat trick every time. When I played, it was Howard Chuck coming in here always had a hat trick. Gretzky from Ontario, Bellows from Ontario. We already knew we had to score 6 goals because Gretzky was getting 5 points. Bellows was getting 3 goals. Howard Chuck was getting 3-4 points. We already knew we had to score because they were going to have a big game playing Hockey Night in Canada Saturday night in a rink they loved watching from Ontario. So this is a tough rink. Anybody else? A couple more? Yeah, no, I actually use Austin Matthews' stick. Yeah, his is close to mine. He scores better than I did. But his is close, and the technology is awesome. And when you grew up with a heavy wood hockey stick, you have to learn how to shoot, proper technique to have a good shot. So there's only 3 or 4 people on each team that could actually shoot. And then there was only 1 out of the 3 that could aim and shoot. Where now, everybody can shoot a puck hard because it's like a golf club. As long as you lean on the stick, the puck goes 80 miles an hour. You don't even have to know what you're doing. The puck's going 80 miles an hour today. The dump-ins, where we used to dump the puck in and go for a line change, the puck could be 20 miles an hour, barely reach the end of the rink. Today, the guy dumps the puck in, it's 80 miles an hour off the far glass without trying. That's the technology of the stick. But there's still only 2 or 3 on the team that know where it's going. That's the difference. Even though the technology is better, the accuracy and the skill of the player still has to be there to make it work. I remember taking my son down to watch Phil Kessel play, and in his career, he's a career 30-goal guy, 35-goal guy, and my son was playing. I said, just watch Phil in practice. He doesn't miss. Every single time he does something, he scores in practice because there's nobody checking you. It's just you and the goalie. He never misses. And that's just a 30-goal scorer, not a 50, 60-goal scorer. And I was trying to teach my son that every time you're in practice, because in today's world, because of technology, kids like YouTube more than they watch the whole game. So they want to see Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid's highlight goal. They don't care about the 50 that he scores a year. They just want the highlight goal. So kids all try the highlight goal in practice and in games, which never works because they're not Crosby or McDavid. But you try to tell them they score 45 other goals that aren't fancy. And to try to get it across to them, it's still about how many you score, not how fancy it is. Like, if you remember Team Canada this year, right? Our first game we lost. You know why we lost the first game? Our best player tried the Michigan and didn't. So there's probably, who is it, Czechoslovakia we're playing against? He would have walked up and down the bench telling his whole team that the Canadian team is trying to embarrass you by trying a highlight goal that you only try in practice. So that team would have got so fired up, and they played better than they should have, and we weren't prepared for that. Just because of, and not that our best player is still the best player. We averaged 5-6 points a game. But just by doing those things, fired up the other team, because the coach could use that to fire him up. We were good after that. He never tried that again after that first game. And those little things are the part of the learning curve that our kids all go through, and that you can do that highlight thing, but what does it do if it doesn't work? And those are all just learning curves with kids, but the stuff, I think I just seen it happen in U18 girls. A Swedish girl just did it unbelievable. A 14-year-old did it under full speed. If you catch the highlight, it's unbelievable. A 14-year-old person doing it in a game at World Championships level. It was unbelievable if you catch the video of her doing it. One more, and I think we're going to wrap it up. If you guys have one more question, or?
How do you think
$8.7 million a year. To put it in round numbers, I would love to be because it's not the fighting part, that's gone. And fighting left because of technology. Guys would get on the phone because everybody had phones in the dressing room. So in the old days, the fighter had to play a little bit. Well, as the players started getting bigger and bigger, and now it was just fighting. Didn't really have anything to do with the game. You know, ahead of me, John Ferguson, the Montreal Canadiens, had 20 goals, but was the league tough guy. Gordie Howe was the league tough guy, was the best player. Well, now our tough guys are 6'5", 280, and they are training off-season to fight. So they're boxing, taekwondo, they're doing everything because they know the guy they have to fight on the other team is doing the same thing. So they're not doing anything hockey-related to be a better hockey player. And then, because of technology, second period, one guy's going to text the other guy, okay, we're going to fight first shift, second period. In the dressing room, they're sending a text to another player. So now, that's not any part of the game. I have no facts on this, but I can see the NHL probably getting pretty scared going, you know, you're going to have an accident in a sport anyway that's physical. These guys are these guys are big and they're tough. Something bad might happen. So let's quell that and more skill rate. Because our top to bottom skill level in the NHL on every team now is unbelievable versus our day. And so I think they got nervous with that. And so my style is the power forward. Like, imagine our team if you could add a power forward that finishes checks, and you're now playing with Matthews and Marner, who do everything fancy. Because remember, Matthews was getting face washed, and somebody said he's got to stick up for himself more. No, I don't want Austin sticking up for himself. I want him to do whatever he wants on the ice. I will make sure he can do whatever he wants. If you want to laugh at somebody, laugh at him. I'll look after him. But then that's how I make Austin better. If he has that kind of confidence, now he takes that skill level, he'll do what he wants on the ice. When I was playing with Dougie Gilmour, we were playing a playoff game in Vancouver. And that's what happened. And Gino Ojek was their team tough guy, was all over Dougie. Well, I'm not going to fight Gino Ojek. He's their team tough guy. If I fight him, he's taking me off the ice, so then I'm not being effective. So I grabbed Pavel Bure, their best player, and I dragged him over beside Dougie and Gino. And I said, you hit Dougie, I'll hit your best player. So Bure gets back to the bench and tells Gino, would you leave Dougie alone? But now our best players can be best players, and the game can be settled. And that's, a lot of things happen on the ice like that, the talking. Not so much today because you get in trouble talking. There's the only one thing I really don't like about it, I don't like microphones in around the ice. I don't think you fans need to hear what goes on. Because it's like a radar police hiding behind the street sign. Oh, I got you for speeding. Well, we're going to catch somebody doing something wrong, and it might not be that bad, but now the league has to do something. Because in today's world, you got to make sure there's repercussions. Well, you're trying to catch them, but you don't want to catch them. And you're asking players that play a physical style or an antagonistic style, you want them to play on the edge, but don't cross the line because they're effective. But if they cross the line, they get suspended and they're fine. So they're making it too hard when you put microphones and everything on there because you're asking the guys to play one way, but you're going to slap them in the hand if they go over the line. And that's the only thing. I think there's something as a fan where you don't know everything. I don't like cameras in the dressing room because nobody acts normal. Like even when you did, was it last year the camera followed our team around the whole year and made a show on it? Do you really think any of those people, when the camera had them all day, that they acted what they'd normally do? None of us would. And so that'd have been a tough year. Imagine that last year. Everywhere you went, there was a camera with you, everywhere. And when we didn't win, they changed the whole story. They threw the script out and redid the script and made it how we were losers. And they did that because they thought we were going to win. We didn't. So they couldn't sell the product because we lost. So they threw everything out. And now they started putting stuff in there that the players had no idea was going to be in there. So they weren't happy with it. So you're trying to catch guys. And that's too hard at too high a level a sport, I think. But other than that, technology is unbelievable where it's it's come to for the game, whether it's like we had, you know, you guys take your skates to the pro shop and you get, okay, I sharpen my skates. The Toronto Maple Leafs have 23 players on the roster, 18 different kinds of skate sharpenings. So that trainer has to sharpen 18 different, he's readjusting the sharpener because there's 18 different skate sharpenings for our 23 guys. Austin Matthews, I thought, you know, you have a good hockey stick, I keep it. I scored 60 goals. He goes through 2 or 3 different patterns. He changes it up. I score 60. I don't touch nothing. I'd be using my wood today if I could score 60 with it. But with that, thank you so much for listening, and have a great day, great conference.
Give it up to the greatest hockey player to wear this jersey. Wendell, if we can just get some pictures up here from you.
Oh, here.
Thank you on behalf of CyberX for showing up here.
All right.
Signing it live.
Where's my picture, guys? There we go.
He's signing it live.
Wendell's going to be signing this jersey so we can raffle it off on day 2. Thank you. Give it up, everyone.